Hello, everyone, and I hope I'm actually live this time. I am live this time, and I am here talking all about Viking warrior women. Welcome again to Collie's class. I had a very cool helmet on earlier, and I realized I was doing my entire live feed to myself and not actually live to anyone else. So, hey, welcome to Viking Women Warriors for Collie's class. It's good to be back. I haven't done this in a year, so obviously, it took a second to figure out how to do it again. But I'm back and excited to talk to you all about Viking Women Warriors. So I'm going to take this back off and we are going to talk. Today's topic of conversation was actually brought to you by one of my students who thought it'd be great to know more about women Vikings. Now, what we do know, we know that women in Viking Age had many domestic roles. They took care of the home, the children, the elderly, cooking, making clothes. They made materials, tools for the household. They took care of the house. But they did have a lot of freedoms. They owned land. They could initiate divorces if they weren't a fan of their husbands. They could serve as clergy, and they could run their own business. They had a lot of responsibilities in the Viking Age. They also were trained to fight. They had to protect their home and their family in case of an invasion. They couldn't just sit back and hope that the man took care of things. Now, where did this interest come up? Well, back in the 1800s, a grave was discovered in Birka, Sweden, and it was originally discovered a single Viking with weapons surrounding them, horses at their feet, arrows at their heads, a sword at the right, an axe at the left, and laying on a shield. Originally in the 1800s, they assumed this was a male Viking warrior buried with all of his goods. And I forgot to include, they also had found pieces from Nefertafel, which is Viking chess. It's a strategy game, typically for Viking boys to learn how to play war strategy games. Later, back in 2017, this site was revisited, and through DNA testing, they found out this grave was actually a woman. Now, some historians think that it was a woman, but really there was a male must have been buried next to her, and therefore she must have been his wife or a servant. No, there was no other skeleton buried next to this woman. This woman was a Viking warrior. They don't know much about her, but that was 2017, and they are still doing research to find out more. We know a lot about Viking women warriors in literature and mythology. The most famous type of mortal warrior woman was the shield maiden. Shield maidens were women who took up the sword, the shield, and other weapons such as the axe and fought in battles alongside the men. Stories of shield maidens have been found in the sagas of groups of ladies en masse, up to 200 at a time, rising up and defeating armies to help out their tribe. Now, most of those stories can't be 100% completely historically proven true because these stories are from the sagas and the Viking tales, which were repeated orally, as traditional literature is, repeated over and over and over again until they finally were written down. So although they might have had some aspects that were true way back when, things might have changed over time. Now, what is the point of all this? Well, the Norse culture respected women so much that they elevated them to heroic levels in their literature, which just wasn't done before then. You might have heard of the stories of the Valkyries or the goddesses Freya and Skadi, but have you heard of any of the mortal shield maidens? Well, today you're going to. Such as these fantastic ladies right here. We have Freitas Eriksdottir, Lagarza, Olga of Kiev, Gudrid Berjarnerdottir, Sigurd the Proud, and Un the Deep-Minded. Now, some of you might have heard of some of these names before. These are all fantastic ladies who have some historical significance in the Viking era, and actually we're learning even more about them as we go. The three that have been underlined are the three we're going to talk about today. But the others, hey, I've given you a list of some names. Go out and do some research as well. And if you find out some cool things about those amazing Viking ladies, make a video, send it to me, and we'll put it on the end of this video on Collie's class on YouTube. Besides, I'd love to see what you learn out there. And a shout out to Andy and Casey. Hi, girls. Good to see you. We are going to start off with, here she is, Freitas Eriksdottir. And I'm going to get used to this camera again. You may have heard of Eric the Red. I would hope that you would have heard of Eric the Red. I hope I taught you a little bit in history about that already. But Freitas was Eric's daughter. Now, she went on a journey to Vinland with Leif. You might have heard of Leif Erikson. They went off and were exploring the land of Vinland. While they were doing that, did you know that she was 8 months pregnant at the time? Yep, she was. She's pretty tough to be going off and exploring, traveling by Viking longship and exploring Vinland while pregnant. But she wasn't going to be left behind. While journeying to Vinland, they met a group of natives who were already on the land. Leif had made an arrangement with them that they could still explore their part of the land if they stayed out of the Vinlanders' way. That didn't last for very long. One of the cows that went on the trip with the Vikings, because cattle were frequently taken out on trips, you got to have food and milk, the cow got loose, ran into the Vinlanders' territory, causing quite a ruckus. This caused the Vinlanders to panic and came over to attack the Vikings. The Vikings, not ready to be attacked or not wanting to be in part of a battle in Vinland, panicked and took off for the boats. Well, they took off running as fast as they could, not wanting to be attacked or attack back, and, well, Freitas was 8 months pregnant. I remember being pregnant, and I don't remember being able to run that fast. She couldn't either. So what did she do? She did the only thing a tough Viking warrior woman would do. She picked up the nearest sword she could find. She turned and faced those natives and started screaming at the top of her lungs in Norse, basically saying things like, "I can take you all. I'm strong. I'm tough. Come at me." And while she was doing this, she was taking the sword and hitting herself in the chest with it, proving that she was tough. The Vinlanders froze. They didn't know what to do. Who was this crazy lady that the Vikings had left behind? The Vikings had all taken off. The only woman there, or the only person there, was this woman screaming in some strange language they didn't recognize and beating her chest with a sword. They turned and fled. Therefore, she was crowned the victor, so to speak, of that battle, taking on a group of Vinlanders all by herself and proving victorious. Now, Leif Erikson's crew did leave Vinland and leave that island, but her bravery and her courage remained, and that story remained. Now, there are conflicting stories. There's the sagas of the Eric the Red sagas that she was a part of, and that's where that story comes from. There's also the Greenlander saga, which was written several years later, and that talks about her being a little crazy and doing some not very nice things. But this was also a saga written years later, after new settlers had come in, and they were trying to show Freitas in a light that wasn't very kind because she still believed in her gods. She was still pagan, and the Greenlander saga was written from a Christian point of view. So they wanted to point her out as being a heathen, being a not very nice person. Look, she believed in the wrong gods and goddesses, therefore she was a bad person. So there's two stories about her. choose which one you like the best, I'd say. This statue actually currently stands of her in I'm going to pronounce the word wrong, uh, Reykjavik, Iceland, and that is of her being fierce with her sword. So, Freitas Eriksdottir. Now we move on to another pretty fierce lady. Her name is Lagarza. Now, for those of you who are hanging out with your parents right now, who may have seen the Vikings on HBO, yep, she was on that show. Kids, that show, don't watch. You've got about 10 more years until you need to see that show. It's really neat, and the historians on HBO did a great job finding a lot of their facts from history. She was one of those awesome stories from history. You don't need to see the show to know about her right now, though. So Lagertha, found in the stories by Saxo Grammaticus, who lived in the age of 1160 to 1220 CE. She was mainly just put in as a footnote because the main stories that he wrote about were about a guy called Ragnar Lothbrok. And this is where all the parents go, oh, I know him! I know him! Yes, he is what the entire Viking series is based on. I know, but we're not here to talk about him. We're here to talk about his key ally, Lagertha. Lagertha was actually a member of the royal class under the King of Norway. And the King of Norway also happened to be Ragnar's grandpa. He was killed by the Swedish king Fro, and all of the women in the King of Norway's group, in their family, were treated pretty rudely and pretty meanly after the king was killed. And they were all sort of kicked out of their tribe, kicked out of their houses, and left to fend for themselves. Well, Ragnar found out that his grandfather had been killed, and he came over ready for vengeance. When he arrived in Norway, he found a group of women who were all dressed up in men's armor, holding swords and shields, ready for battle. And the leader of them all, Lagertha. She was ready to go. Her fighting was so impressive, they actually quote it in the story by Saxo Grammaticus, saying, she was a skilled Amazon who, though a maiden, had the courage of a man and fought in front amongst the bravest, with her hair loose over her shoulders. All marveled at her matchless deeds. Yeah, she was tough. She was so impressive, Ragnar got a crush on her and wanted to marry her. She did not want to marry him, and therefore, when he went back to Norway, or at least she thought he went back to Norway, she set up her house with a trained dog and a trained bear in front of her house to prevent any visitors, namely Ragnar, from visiting and trying to court her. They were attack dogs and bears. It was awesome. They did eventually get married, but she didn't like being married to him. It was a very short, very quick marriage, and it ended as them being friends. She did support him in a few other battles, though, and he was still very impressed and mentioned her quite a few times, that she helped him out and she saved his neck. Well, more than a few times. So Lagertha, pretty tough. Now, the last Viking warrior woman we're going to talk about, well, this story is not for the faint of heart. So just keep in mind, Viking women were really tough, lived in really tough times, and, well, she had to make a lot of tough decisions. I also want to say a quick hello to Lily and Ellie and Preston Halverson. Hi, guys. Now, this fantastic lady, Olga of Kiev, also known as Saint Olga, isn't her smile just wonderful and pretty and happy? She looks so happy. So She actually ruled the territory known as Kievan Rus, which is modern day Russia, before it was Russia. Yes, if you remember, the Vikings sailed in and conquered areas of Russia before it became Russia. She was born around 903, but really not much is known about her until after her husband is killed. She marries the guy named Igor, Prince of Kiev, and only after he dies do we really find out about her. Now, the neighboring neighboring village was Drevlin, and Drevlin and Kievan Rus had a love-hate relationship. They helped each other out in several battles and in several wars, fighting other neighborhood countries and tribes, but they didn't get along at all in any way with each other. So one day, when the Prince of Kiev, Igor, went off to the Drevlins to go and ask for uh, some money, basically to keep them all at peace, he went over and said, "We won't attack you if you give us some money." They had a problem with that, and he was killed. Well, that didn't sit well with Olga. Not at all. She was quite upset. No one messes with her family. And before she could actually respond, Prince Mal from the Drevlin area thought it would be a great idea to get married to Olga of Kiev. He thought we could get married and then we could rule as one kingdom. This did not sit well with her at all. So Prince Mal sent over 20 of his best fighters as emissaries, as, "Hey, we would like you to come back and marry Prince Mal." They got off their boat, they met with Olga, and Olga said, "Certainly, gentlemen. Wait on your boat. I'm going to get ready and prepare myself. I will come out and greet you the next day." So they went back to their ships. This was not going to end well for them, because that night Olga had all of her men dig a giant ditch. And as they dug that giant ditch, she prepared to meet with the emissaries the next morning. She brought them up to where her house was. The men were all thrown into the ditch and buried alive. Then Olga sent a message off to Prince Mal and said, "I will accept this marriage proposal, but I believe it would be very important for you to send me all of your noblemen, all of your royalty, all the ruling class. Send them over. I will meet with them and we will come back to Drevlin together and we will have a giant parade and celebrate this new marriage." Prince Mal thought that was a brilliant idea. So he sent a rather large group of about 50 or so of his richest nobles and men over to meet with Olga. When they arrived, she told them, "Well, first you must have dinner. We must celebrate this. Go wash up in the bathhouse." And all 50 of the men went off to the bathhouse. Olga's men locked the door and they burned the bathhouse down. All of this because she was quite upset about her husband's death, which, but she wasn't done yet. Oh no, she was not done yet at all. She decided to send word that she'd be coming to the capital in Drevlin. She was going to accept Prince Mal's invitation, but first she'd like to mourn the loss of her husband. So let's have them all set up a giant feast, a giant celebration for her husband, and then have a party to celebrate the wedding proposal. All this while, Prince Mal thinks nothing of the fact that he hasn't heard back from his emissaries or all the noblemen that he sent over to meet with her. She arrives, and they have a big feast, and they have a big party. And that evening, when everyone is asleep, all of her men get off their ships and kill most of the people in the town. At this point, Prince Mal and those who are still left are begging for her to leave and leave them alone, and whatever it takes. We apologize. We are sorry. Kievan Rus can be its own kingdom. We will leave you alone. Please leave. What will you do to leave? And she says, you know, I think I've gotten enough revenge. I think all you need to give me are 3 sparrows or pigeons from your house, and I will leave and go away, and you will never hear from me again. They shouldn't have done this. They shouldn't have listened to her at all. And they gave her the pigeons, and actually that's very important to see that picture here. One of the most famous paintings is of her with the sparrow with something hanging from its foot. She collects all the pigeons and the sparrows from everyone in Drevlin, and that night, as they're setting up their ships to leave, she has all of her men, all of her army, take a pigeon and tie a string to its foot and attach a little bag of cloth. And in that bag of cloth is a little piece of sulfur. They light that piece of sulfur, send the birds off. All the birds fly back to their houses, their nests, and 500 birds being released with flaming pieces of cloth on them set the entire village on fire. At that point, Olga of Kiev becomes ruler of Drevlin and Kievan Rus and expands her kingdom. Now, she becomes a saint. She didn't exactly do very many saintly things, but she also was the very first ruler in Kievan Rus to convert her entire group of followers to Christianity, and therefore the Christians made her a saint for doing that. So, a very unsaintly Saint Olga, but a very tough Viking woman who stood her ground and did what she needed to do. Again, tough times, and Vikings were very, very tough people. That was just 3, excuse me, of the very tough Viking warrior women that we know about today. There are more. So go out, research, explore, and learn. And if you find out anything cool, let me know, because I'll be here doing a video every day. If you want to learn more as well, there is a documentary on Disney Plus called Viking Warrior Women. It's from National Geographic. It's pretty incredible. Take a look at it. As for me, I'm out until tomorrow, so I will see you all later from Collie's class. See you later, guys. Thanks for joining.